Something inside Buckingham Palace didn't just break quietly, it felt like it completely shattered in silence. It wasn't the kind of moment that comes with noise or visible chaos. Instead, it was the kind of collapse that happens behind closed doors, where the outside world sees nothing at all. Allegedly, a queen consort disappeared through a side entrance in the middle of the night, almost as if she were being quietly erased from the institution itself, like someone being removed from history without a trace. At the very same time inside Windsor Castle, reports suggest that a king was seen falling to his knees in front of the woman believed to be his successor. Yet the most disturbing part of all this is that the public noticed nothing. There were no urgent headlines, no official palace announcement, no emergency briefing, just complete silence. A heavy, controlled silence, the kind powerful institutions use when something so serious happens behind the scenes that even acknowledging it feels dangerous. For years, people assumed the royal family had already faced its biggest storms: Princess Diana's tragedy, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepping back, and constant media scandals. But according to explosive insider claims circulating within palace discussions, none of those past events come close to what allegedly unfolded during one specific royal night involving Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, King Charles III, and Catherine, Princess of Wales. This was not ordinary family conflict anymore. It was described by insiders as something far more severe, an institutional-level breakdown disguised as procedure. And what makes it even more unsettling is the claim that this wasn't a sudden incident. According to whispers reportedly coming from within palace operations, everything had been building quietly for decades, like a hidden system of pressure slowly preparing to explode at the right moment. Camilla, according to these claims, believed she had mastered the internal survival game of the monarchy better than anyone else. She allegedly understood how to influence narratives, how to guide media attention, how to leak selective information just enough to shape public perception, and how to let the press carry out damage control or character destruction on her behalf. This strategy, insiders suggest, may have worked for years, possibly even decades, allowing her to outmaneuver rivals without ever appearing directly involved. But the problem with long-term manipulation, as palace whispers suggest, is that patterns eventually become visible to someone paying close attention. And allegedly, that observer was Princess Anne, quietly watching everything unfold from the background without ever reacting publicly. What makes this even more intense is the claim that certain past controversies, especially those involving Meghan Markle, were not as straightforward as the public believed. While the world remembers headlines like, "Meghan made Kate cry," insiders allegedly suggest a completely different version of events existed behind closed doors, where tensions during bridal preparations reportedly painted a more complex picture. According to these claims, narratives were shifted rapidly, and public sympathy was directed in a very specific way. And this shift, insiders suggest, may have been tied to deeper influence operating within palace communication channels. Over time, Anne reportedly observed these patterns in silence, not reacting emotionally but mentally mapping everything. Because unlike others, she was not seen as someone who engaged in media strategy or emotional storytelling. She was known for discipline, loyalty, and strict focus on duty. And according to palace whispers, that silent observation would later become one of the most critical elements in everything that followed. The allegations surrounding Meghan Markle allegedly became one of the major breaking points in this entire chain of events. The public remembers the widely circulated headlines claiming that Meghan had made Catherine cry, a story that spread rapidly across global media and instantly shaped public opinion against her. However, according to claims attributed to palace insiders, the reality behind that narrative may have been significantly different. These sources allegedly suggest that during tensions related to Princess Charlotte's bridesmaid dress fittings before the royal wedding, it was actually Catherine who left Meghan emotionally distressed, not the other way around. Yet somehow, within a very short time, the public story was reversed completely, and Meghan became the central figure of criticism. Insiders allegedly connect this sudden shift in narrative to influence operating within networks surrounding Camilla's office, suggesting that selective leaks and controlled information may have played a role in shaping how the story was presented to the outside world. According to these claims, one carefully placed narrative shift was enough to completely change public perception, turning Meghan into the villain in the eyes of millions. And reportedly, Meghan herself observed this transformation in silence, deeply aware of how quickly perception had overtaken reality. Meanwhile, Princess Anne allegedly continued watching all of this without engaging in any public reaction or emotional response. She was not known for participating in media narratives or seeking approval from public opinion. Instead, she remained focused on duty, discipline, and loyalty to the institution her mother had protected for decades. That quiet, almost detached approach reportedly made her presence even more significant behind the scenes, because while others reacted outwardly, Anne was allegedly studying patterns internally. According to Palace Whispers, what Camilla viewed as successful survival tactics, managing leaks, shaping press coverage, and influencing perception, was being silently analyzed by and as something far more calculated and potentially dangerous to the stability of the monarchy itself. Over time, this silent observation allegedly built into a deeper understanding of how information moved through the institution, and how narratives could be constructed or destroyed without anyone ever realizing the source. And while all of this unfolded, the tension within the royal environment continued to build in the background, unnoticed by the public but reportedly very visible to those inside the system. As Queen Elizabeth II entered her final years, according to Palace Whispers, the situation inside the royal household allegedly began to shift in a way that felt increasingly tense and carefully controlled. Publicly, everything still appeared stable, with official duties continuing and appearances maintained as usual, but insiders reportedly describe a very different atmosphere behind closed doors. As the Queen's health gradually declined, preparations for a major transition quietly began, yet alongside those formal arrangements, claims suggest that internal positioning and influence building were also taking place. According to these allegations, Camilla was already working towards strengthening her role within the institution, aiming for greater ceremonial presence, expanded authority, and deeper influence within royal operations. Staff members reportedly noticed subtle but consistent changes, where certain discussions and decisions appeared to reflect a gradual consolidation of power. Over time, these observations allegedly spread through internal circles, creating a growing sense of unease. One insider reportedly described the environment with a chilling phrase, suggesting that powerful interests were already moving strategically while the Queen was still alive and visibly declining. That idea, whether literal or symbolic, is said to have left a lasting impression on Princess Anne, who was present during much of this period. According to these claims, Anne witnessed both the emotional reality of her mother's condition and the institutional behavior unfolding around it, creating a deeply conflicting environment between duty and observation. However, even with this increasing tension, nothing yet had triggered a direct confrontation. Instead, everything allegedly continued building quietly, layer by layer, as if the entire system was slowly approaching a breaking point that no one openly acknowledged. According to insider claims, the real shift began when Prince William quietly started restructuring certain parts of royal operations. On the surface, everything appeared routine and administrative, with no visible signs of conflict or disruption. However, behind the scenes, sources allegedly described these changes as far more significant than they seemed. William's internal team reportedly began reviewing financial records and charitable allocations linked to the Duchy of Cornwall, and what they allegedly found caused serious concern within certain circles. According to these claims, there were indications that portions of charitable funding had been redirected in ways that appeared closely connected to networks associated with Camilla's personal patronage influence. These alleged connections suggested a gradual expansion of control and presence within institutional frameworks that were meant to remain strictly structured and transparent. As this information circulated internally, insiders claim it significantly changed William's approach. Instead of passive observation, he allegedly shifted into active planning mode, focusing on how to restructure or limit certain influences within the system. This development reportedly marked a turning point in the internal dynamics of the palace. At the same time, Princess Anne is said to have become more directly involved in monitoring the situation, moving from silent observation to a more active awareness of what was unfolding. According to these whispers, Anne's role was not emotional or reactive, but highly controlled and precise, focused on understanding the full scope of internal changes. As tensions gradually increased behind the scenes, the atmosphere inside the institution reportedly became more strained, even though outwardly everything still appeared stable to the public. According to the circulating insider claims, Princess Anne eventually moved from silent observation into direct involvement as the situation escalated. Reports suggest that she was no longer just watching developments from a distance, but had begun engaging with the internal conflict in a more decisive way. Allegedly, she entered a critical moment carrying documented material connected to the ongoing internal investigation tied to William's findings. Her approach, according to these whispers, was not emotional or dramatic, but extremely controlled and precise, reflecting the way she has always been described within royal circles. Insiders claim she directly confronted Camilla with clear and structured information, presenting the evidence in a formal and uncompromising manner. The interaction is described as tense but quiet, without raised voices or public visibility, yet carrying a heavy sense of finality. According to these allegations, and made it clear that certain patterns of influence and control were no longer acceptable within the institution's structure. In that moment, Camilla allegedly found herself in a position where long-used strategies of negotiation, influence, or narrative control were no longer effective. Instead, she was faced with a direct institutional challenge that could not be redirected or softened. Palace whispers suggest that this confrontation marked a major turning point in the internal balance of power, shifting dynamics in a way that could not easily be reversed. According to continuing insider claims, the situation reportedly became even more complex after Anne's direct confrontation, because additional layers of information allegedly began to surface within palace circles. Whispers suggest that Anne was not acting solely on personal judgment, but may have also been in possession of sensitive material connected to Queen Elizabeth II's final private instructions. These were allegedly contained in a sealed letter that was never intended for immediate release, only to be revealed under specific conditions if the stability of the monarchy was ever seriously at risk. According to these claims, Anne had been aware of this document for some time, and its contents were considered significant enough to influence how internal decisions were being approached. This alleged knowledge reportedly changed the tone of everything happening behind the scenes, shifting it from a simple internal disagreement to something far more structured and deliberate. Insiders suggest that what appeared as sudden action was actually the result of long-term preparation, carefully timed to align with other internal developments already in motion. As a result, Anne's role is described not as reactive, but as part of a broader sequence of planned institutional responses. This interpretation paints the situation not as chaos, but as controlled pressure being released at a specific moment when conditions were most aligned for change. Meanwhile, within palace corridors, the atmosphere reportedly grew increasingly tense, as more individuals began to sense that multiple internal threads were converging toward a single unavoidable outcome. At the same time, according to insider claims, a separate but equally significant development was allegedly unfolding inside Windsor Castle. It is suggested that Catherine, Princess of Wales, arrived quietly and alone, without any public escort or official announcement, creating an atmosphere of secrecy around her presence. Reports describe her entry as intentionally discreet, as if the meeting she was heading toward was not meant for public awareness or ceremonial visibility. Inside the castle, she was allegedly received in a private setting where King Charles III was already present. However, insiders claim he was not in his usual formal state as monarch, but instead appeared in a more personal and emotionally stripped-down condition, without ceremonial symbols of authority. This detail is often emphasized in these whispers because it allegedly reflects that the moment was not about public duty or institutional performance, but something far more private and internal. According to these claims, what followed was not a political exchange or structured royal discussion, but an emotionally heavy confrontation with responsibility, regret, and personal reflection. Insiders suggest that King Charles had been exposed to private assessments regarding the emotional strain Catherine had endured over time, including long-term pressure, public scrutiny, and internal expectations placed upon her. This allegedly forced him to confront uncomfortable realities about the way responsibilities and protections had been distributed within the institution. The emotional weight of this realization, according to these claims, had a profound impact on him, creating a moment of deep internal conflict that contrasted sharply with his public role as sovereign. According to insider whispers, around the same time, a chain of sudden internal actions allegedly began unfolding within the palace that affected Camilla's position in a very immediate and unsettling way. Reports claim that her access credentials within certain palace systems stopped functioning without warning, creating confusion and disorientation in the moment. For someone who had been deeply integrated into royal operations for years, This sudden loss of access allegedly felt like an instant reversal of status, as if the institution itself had quietly withdrawn recognition. Insiders describe this as a form of psychological and institutional pressure rather than a public action, because nothing was officially announced, yet the functional result was immediate and undeniable. Following this, it is alleged that several key members of her personal staff received abrupt termination notices, and internal communication channels that previously operated normally became unresponsive. According to these claims, the change was not gradual but sudden, creating a sense that the support structure around her had been systematically reduced within a very short time. Palace whispers suggest that individuals who once maintained close operational contact with her were suddenly reassigned or removed from visibility, leaving her increasingly isolated within the system she once navigated with confidence. This alleged sequence of events reportedly contributed to a growing sense of uncertainty, as traditional forms of influence and communication appeared to weaken almost simultaneously. Insiders describe this stage as a quiet but decisive shift, where institutional behavior itself began to reflect a different internal direction, even though no official statements were made publicly. According to continued insider claims, one of the most symbolic and emotionally striking moments allegedly involved Camilla's exit from the palace environment. Reports suggest that she did not leave through the main ceremonial entrance typically reserved for senior royals, but instead was guided toward a more discreet service doorway usually associated with staff movement and operational access. While to an outside observer this might seem like a minor logistical detail, insiders emphasize that within royal tradition, symbolism carries deep meaning, and even small procedural choices can reflect major shifts in status and influence. According to these whispers, this particular exit was interpreted internally as a clear message that her position within the institutional structure had changed significantly. The absence of any public announcement or formal explanation reportedly added to the sense of silence surrounding the moment, making the transition feel more like a quiet removal than a public event. At the same time, insiders claim that within internal channels, responses to her communications became increasingly limited, with delays and non-responses reinforcing a sense of separation. This gradual withdrawal of engagement allegedly contributed to a situation where she found herself increasingly isolated from the operational core of the institution. According to these claims, the overall effect was not delivered through a single action, but through a series of coordinated procedural shifts that together created a complete change in her standing within the system, all without any official public confrontation or statement. According to the final layer of insider claims, what followed was not a formal announcement or public confrontation, but a prolonged period of silence that carried its own weight. Camilla allegedly attempted to reach King Charles multiple times over the following 48 hours, but reportedly received no response. This continued silence is described by insiders as one of the most emotionally intense aspects of the entire situation, because it suggested not just distance, but complete withdrawal of direct communication. At the same time, it is claimed that internal pressure within the institution made it clear that any premature contact or interference could risk exposing sensitive internal matters tied to ongoing investigations and structural reviews. As a result, King Charles was allegedly placed in a deeply conflicted position, caught between personal loyalty and institutional stability, where any emotional decision could have broader consequences. Meanwhile, within palace operations, further symbolic changes reportedly continued, including adjustments to internal representation and visibility that signaled a shift in influence across key roles. Insiders suggest that Catherine's position became more central in public-facing responsibilities, while Prince William's influence remained largely behind the scenes, shaping operations in a quieter but strategic way. Throughout all of this, Princess Anne is described as maintaining her characteristic silence, standing as a stabilizing presence rather than a visible actor. According to these claims, the monarchy continued functioning publicly as normal, with ceremonies and appearances proceeding as expected, but internally, its structure had allegedly shifted in ways that were not visible to the outside world. Ultimately, insiders suggest that what happened during this period was not a single event, but a gradual and irreversible transformation of internal dynamics, where power, influence, and emotional weight were redistributed in silence, leaving the institution operating in a completely new reality beneath its unchanged public image.